Scientology could be called, well, you could call it a religion of religions.
Howdy everybody, and welcome to the Indie Scientology podcast with your host Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy. These are closed-door secret briefings about vital information about Scientology and the world that you need to know. And today's briefing is a commentary of the Going Clear movie. It's like a movie about Scientology, but it's like an attack piece of Scientology. Like it's a movie that's attacking Scientology, you know what I mean? Like it's made by people who don't like Scientology, and the movie's attacking Scientology. So I thought, let's make this, let's listen to like the first 15 minutes of it or something, and I'll pause it every time it says false data, and I'll correct the false data of this Going Clear movie. It came out about 4 years ago now, and so this should be a great video. But before that, I want to do a shout out to OGKX116, the YouTuber from Kansas City. He's a dancer, and he wanted me to do a shout out to him. So howdy, I saw you dancing and I like it. Yeah, I used to do tap dancing. Nah. This briefing was going to be actually me watching an episode of Leah Remini's TV show, The Aftermath, and correcting the false data, but it wasn't like chock full of false data, and it was like drawn out, and it was like the way the show is it like they'll talk to someone and they'll be like, oh, I was in the Sea Org and they used to have security guards, and so like it wasn't like a gold mine of false data, but obviously there's definitely false data, and it's the whole Leah Remini show is pitched like you know, attacking Scientology and stuff, and is made by people who hate Scientology. But it's like just the way that they set the show out, and it's more of a reality TV show, and it's more about talking, and it just wouldn't be as punchy. But I think this Going Clear movie is more good because it's more classic. It has more information that I can really just rip into more. Also, I wanted to find the episode of Leah Remini that had Aaron Smith-Levin in it, because I found that one, Aaron Smith-Levin's story was kind of silly, and it did have a bit of false data, or just like it just needed comments, but I couldn't download it for whatever reason. It's taking a while, but maybe I'll do that in the future. Anyway, this movie is I think it's written by Lawrence Wright, and I think he's a former Scientologist, and he was involved with the church for years, and I think apparently he found out that the church supported some anti-gay politician or some anti-gay thing, and they didn't even support it like a lot, but or they barely even supported it, but they just refused not to say that it's okay to be gay or something. And then he just got all upset and then left Scientology, and I think he might have been upset about other things as well, but it's an odd thing to make you leave Scientology because of that. And obviously he isn't schooled on the social engineering program to turn us all gay, and he isn't schooled on the fact that homosexuality is a mental health problem, and that, I mean, you know, I think people should be allowed to be who they are, but we shouldn't be cheering gayness and promoting it and all that sort of stuff like it's a sign of a sick society. When homosexuality and transgenderism and ADD, when all that stuff goes up, it means that the society has problems. So anyway, I'll play this documentary, and let's go. Let's have a listen to it.
And I was in awe because you thought you were doing good. I mean,
they just got the credits coming up at the moment.
I felt a tremendous amount of relief.
I've got the answers for everything within the religion.
What are you most afraid of?
It was dark.
3 a.m, there's a knock at the hotel room door.
Stop. I'll say whatever you want. I'll write up anything you
I
want.
flipped out. I mean, I started punching holes in the walls.
These things didn't seem quite right.
And you just feel so foolish at that point.
Do you know what? I'll give it credit for filming quality and for interesting sounds and stuff and editing. Like, I'll give that credit, but where it lacks is data. Like, it's not, because I watched this years ago, it's not an accurate and fair representation of Scientology. See, here's the thing, right? And this is what I'm going to say. I'm going to predict what this story is going to do, even though I've seen it. But, like, I'll tell you what basically is going to happen. Okay, so when it comes to anything, when it comes to drinking tea, or when it comes to there being some court case with some guy who smashed a car into a wall, right? You can take either side, or you can take the middle run, if you know what I mean. So you can say the guy's bad, you can say the guy's good, or you can say he's kind of good and bad. Do you know what I mean? And this is what lawyers are experts at. So let's say the guy who smashed the car into the wall, okay? The lawyer, in that situation, the police, right, the police lawyer or whatever, will be saying, the guy's bad, look, he smashed his car into the wall, and he'll show the judge the evidence, and he'll go, the guy's bad, and he might say something like, look, he's an alcoholic, or something like that. Then the guy who's been hired by the person who smashed the car into the wall to protect him so he doesn't get sent to jail will go with the whole, he's really good. He'll come up with these excuses why the guy smashed the car into the wall. He'll say, oh, look, he volunteered at churches. Oh, look, he's got children to look after. And, oh, look, he painted flowers for like a week, for 2 years or something. Oh, he's such a good guy. And so both people in the arguments, right, are actually giving a false representation of the person. One guy is saying he's worse than what he really is. The other guy is saying he is much better than what he really is, right? This is why lawyers are just, don't get me started on lawyers, but it's just, but you can, I imagine there are, some good ones out there and stuff that will actually say an honest argument. But anyway, so then the judge hears both sides and then decides, right? So when it comes to stuff like documentaries about a new vitamin, or documentaries about Scientology, or global warming, is it really happening? You can do the exact same thing. You can go with the, yes, it's totally happening, and just completely make everyone, completely go with it's happening, just lie and just say connect all these dots that aren't really true and stuff, and say, yeah, it's totally happening, we've got all this stuff, and exaggerate how much it's happening, right? Or you can go the other route and ignore the little bits of evidence that it's happening and say it's not happening at all, global warming isn't happening at all, and completely go with some really anti-global warming side. The truth is, from my investigation into global warming, is it's a bit of both. Or it's very complex, and it's a bit of both, right? And but I don't think that we should be brainwashing people and have all these big government thingos and all that sort of stuff, and tax us and change our light bulbs and put salt, and all this government stuff is all bullshit. I don't believe in that philosophical reason. I say, hey, right, maybe it's happening, right? But it's I don't agree in the whole communism, socialism way to solve the problem of global warming. Do you see what I mean? And also, I just don't think the evidence is good enough that... Yeah, so anyway, so I'm sort of more in the middle. And if I was a lawyer, or if I was going to make a documentary, guess what? I would show both sides. And at the end of it, do you want to know what? You wouldn't even know what to make of it. You'll be like, well, is global warming happening or not? And I'll be like, yeah, because that's all I can work out from all the evidence. I don't know. You know what I mean? Because that's a fair way of presenting it, right? When it comes to Scientology, the mainstream media, like any alternative health or vitamin thing, or just anything that's alternative, and also any spiritual group, they make them out to be like crazy cults and stuff, because they're running a anti-religion program, a social engineering program across the Western world that's anti-religion. They don't want people getting any new religions. They think that they're bad or something, or they think that people will give too much respect to the religion and not respect the government, or something like that. Or religious people are hard to control because they follow their book and they don't follow what the president says, or something like that. Okay, so they attack Scientology, right? And they almost never, I've only seen it once or twice, have they actually given a fair representation of Scientology in the mainstream media or in these films and stuff. Like, I'm serious. Only like twice have they, and then there'll be a list of all these documentaries that are all slanted in the wrong direction, like the court case situation. You know, it's like you got some dodgy guy who smashed a car into a wall and was smoking crack and has this huge criminal record, but the lawyer's saying, he's great, yeah, and really exaggerating that the guy's a good person. And it's just like, it's not a fair representation. So with Scientology, it's like that. It's like they've all decided, the mainstream media has decided that they're going to go with Scientology's bad argument, and they're going to go fully with that. They're not going to go with Scientology's good, it has some bad elements, but I don't know. They're not going to go with that one. No. They're going with the Scientology is bad. I go with the Scientology is really good. It has some bad stuff and some problems, and I talk about them, right? But it's overall, it's good and it's fantastic, and I recommend everyone to try it. And it's totally awesome, right? But there is some bad stuff, and that's what I talk about in it. I mean, I criticize the outpointy OTs, and we know outpointy OTs exist. It's a thing, it's a phenomenon, and it exists. So I don't sit back and do these videos and suddenly go, oh, I have to cut out that bit about outpointing OTs. We don't want anyone knowing about that. Or, oh, I have to cut out that bit about saying that there seems to be an increased rate of cancer in Scientology. Oh, I'll cut that out of the thing. Oh, make people think Scientology is really good. I don't go, oh, let's cut out, you know, I don't filter the truth from my podcasts and stuff, right? We confront, us free zoners confront that there is some problems in Scientology. We don't deny it. You know, and I openly say, I do think that there's something wrong with the OT levels, and I think that Captain Bill might have come up with a solution to the problem with the OT levels for these people taking forever on OT7 or something like that, right? So I say it. I don't say the OT levels are fantastic, there's nothing wrong with Scientology, right? Which would be, again, bullshit. If there was a YouTuber out there, right, I would be criticizing the YouTuber if he deleted anything suggesting Scientology is bad and just lied, because it's the argument where it's just false. The side where you say Scientology is really, really bad, that's totally wrong. You're not showing a fair side of all the amazing stuff that Scientology's done. The argument that Scientology is really, 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 really good, and you're just completely ignoring that there's problems with Scientology, right? That's fucked up as well. We've got to go with the freaking truth. You know what I mean? And the truth is, it's a bit of both, but overall, it's better. I mean, really is. Overall, it's better. I mean, I can't deny it. I mean, you literally get taught how to read in Scientology, you get taught how to investigate things. Anyway. So, with this whole thingo that we're watching, right? They've just gone with the whole argument that Scientology is really bad. And it's just bullcrap, and that's why I'm trying to correct the false data. But let's just listen, because all the other documentaries on mainstream media, they do the same thing where they just go with all the bad arguments or whatever. And they do this with other things. They do things with new alternative therapies and like a special vitamin or something. They'll do a hit piece. They're called a hit piece in the mainstream media. And they'll attack that person who invented that cancer cure, and they'll find something in the person's past. So in the person's past, they might have had 2 wives or something, right? And then they'll go, oh, you used to have 2 wives, and they'll go, oh, and look, your little thing that you invented that you claim is curing cancer isn't curing cancer, didn't cure this guy's cancer. And then when they found some guy that didn't cure, but even though they ignore all these other guys that did cure cancer of, it's a bullshit, unfair, it's not dealing in the frickin' truth. And that's what this thingo going clear is about. And the other documentaries that they do on those freaking crappy TV shows on the mainstream media about Scientology, they just don't, it's a bias, it's unfair. It's unfair what they're doing, they're not being balanced. Here you're going to hear the balance, so I'm going to play this.
Tell me about it.
I'm going to correct what they're saying to make it to what the actual truth is. All right.
I was 21 years old, living in London, Ontario, Canada. I wanted to be a documentary filmmaker. And someone had told me
Yeah, I think this is the guy who made the film.
about what they said there's this cult in New York called Scientology, which I'd never heard of. And if you give them all your money, they'll make anything possible in your life. And about 6 months later, I was walking down the street. This guy was there selling books.
Actually, I don't know, this is Paul Haggis, but whoever.
And I realized they were all the same book, Dianetics, which again I'd never heard of.
He might have taken the book and then made it into the film, but the other guy wrote the book. The book might have actually not even been by a Scientologist. Anyway, irrelevant. I'm just going to correct what they say.
He handed me one and asked me to look at it. I was talking, I wasn't really listening to him. As I opened the cover, and it said, stamped in the inside page, said Church of Scientology. And I said, take me there.
All right.
Here we go.
I'm not a great multitasker, and if I feel like doing something, that's what I do. And I was into this shit, and I was becoming an auditor.
This guy's cool, and he should join the Free Zone. He's that Jason Begay guy, but he's smart, he's switched on. He found out the church was corrupt, but I don't think he didn't work out what really went on. And you almost have to be a conspiracy theorist to work out what really went on, like how the church got corrupted and got stolen from, and like David Miscavige stole the church from L. Ron Hubbard, as he was an old man. Serious. It's a long story, and it was possibly a government infiltration. Anyway.
I was in Scientology probably 4 months, and I had done more than John Travolta had done, and he'd been there for 85 years or some shit. My agents call, you got an audition, fuck it, I don't really, you know what I mean? I've always on about a spiritual adventure, and this was like, whoa, this is an interesting road, So, what was the question?
So tell me, how was it you first got involved in Scientology?
Well, I was introduced to it by some friends. I don't know if they said it or if it was just talked about by others that they had superpowers. And I was really young, but I thought I'd like to have superpowers. But also I had done so much political social work. So this really looked like it was a solution to handling a lot of the world's problems. Instead of trying to handle things en masse, you could deal with it person by person, make each person better, and thus the world would get better in short order.
I'm going to criticize the creepiness of it. It's got a bit of a scariness to it. Like the way they use the music and cut the scenes, and it's got a aesthetic feel of a bit of scariness, but it's not too excessive actually, which is kind of okay. Some of those other TV shows, when they really attack, they use really creepy music and they put black and white stuff on it, and it's just totally ridiculous.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome to our whole new world. It's a world where the operative phrase reads, exceeding all expectations, transcending all parameters, extending the boundaries beyond any boundary, not to mention Godspeed, lightning speed, and a quantum leap in sheer rapidity of progress up the bridge. We're out to make every life extraordinary. And if by chance it ever seems laborious or a sacrifice, then you are looking at the off-ramps instead of the highway. You are missing the signpost up ahead, the one that reads, next stop, infinity.
Probably my favorite concept of Scientology is a world without criminality, a world without war, and a world without insanity. And I know of no other group that their goals are that clear. Look, you name me another philosophy, religion, or technology that one of its main goals, besides the three I mentioned earlier, where joy is the operative concept.
Sorry, I mentioned the gay thing earlier in the podcast. I think that it might actually, some of it might be a DNA thing, but definitely a large chunk is a full-blown actual mental health problem. Like the person also has a drug addiction and also has like a sex addiction, and also has like depression or like an anxiety, and they're taking like psych meds for anxiety. And it's just clearly the homosexuality is a mental health problem. But in other situations, I think it honestly is possible that genetically they're just wired gay. But I think that's like, I don't know, 25%. I think the majority is definitely a mental health thing. So Travolta, I think, is in much more the respectable category.
These are the times now, people. Okay? These are the times we will all remember. Were you there? What did you do? So what do you say? Clean this place up? Because we're counting on you. All right? Dweller H.
Scientology is such a subject of fascination for people. How did you get engaged in the story?
Well, I've always been interested in religions and why people believe one idea rather than another. I've studied Jonestown, radical Islam. They're oftentimes good-hearted people, idealistic, but full of a kind of crushing certainty that eliminates doubt.
Sorry, I'm sure this dumbass doesn't know about Jonestown actually being a CIA cult that was created by the CIA, and he probably goes, I studied Jonestown, and he probably just thought, oh, you know, people want to start up a good thing, and then it turned bad with this crazy cult leader. Like, he's just a walking ball of false data. Do you see what I mean? Like, he doesn't know the truth about Jonestown. Do you think he knows the truth about Scientology or other things? Anyway.
You know, my goal wasn't to write an expose. It was simply to understand Scientology, trying to understand what people get out of it. You know, why did they go into it in the first place? I was interested in intelligence.
Yeah, I would love to know if this guy's really actually tried Scientology, like given it a go for like 3 years, done a lot of it, and tried to actually believe in it. Because you can't just try one Scientology course and think you know Scientology, or just talk to people who have done it and read some stuff and think that you have any idea what Scientology is. It's very complex.
And skeptical people who are drawn into a belief system and wind up acting on those beliefs in ways they never thought they would.
My first fault of this movie is the fact that they're interviewing a dumbass. And, sorry, I better correct that. And this is offensive, but I have to say it because it's the truth. He's probably smarter than the average person. Let's just be honest. But like, he's not an expert. He's not the person who should have his own movie. You know what I mean? Like, he just doesn't. He doesn't know about Jones. Like, he does so much in life he doesn't know about. I bet you he doesn't know that the aliens are working with the government. And I know that sounds wacky and out there, but it's actually happening, and it's just a big piece of data that you need to know about because it explains the Bible, explains this, explains that. It's a huge chunk of data to know that there's beings, that aliens exist. It's if you're going around in life without that piece of knowledge, right, you're susceptible to coming to false conclusions. So I'm sure there's so many things that this guy just doesn't know about, and he shouldn't be on a documentary.
The Church of Scientology turned out to be 2 offices above a Woolworth store. He asked me, what's ruining your life? I said, oh, I'm in love. I'm in love with this woman. It's impossible. I don't know what to do. I need some help. And he said, we can help you with that. I said, really? He said, yes. And I ran home and got her. And I said, we have to sign up for this. It sounds really good. It could, save our relationship. So we both signed up the next day to do a course, which I think cost $50. The thing that absolutely got me and stayed with me forever was the very first thing I read. When you opened the course back, and it said, paraphrasing, don't believe any of this. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, discard it. I was troubled by the fact they called it a religion, but I figured, it's some tax scam. It's fine with me. I don't really care about that as long as it works.
the first exercise after you do all this reading and stuff like that is this thing called OTTR0, which is basically you sit just like this, eyes closed, 3 feet away from somebody who's doing the same thing, and you basically confront them, you know? And in Scientology lingo, I went exterior. Exteriorizing is what they call it. You know, you leave your body. So it was a transcendent experience for me. And that made me go, holy fucking shit, this is, wow.
It's pretty cool. So this is actually turning out to be a bit like a Leah Remini show, where it's not like punchy and just like chock full of false data after false data that I can make a comment on. It's like, anyway, I thought it would be a little bit more punchier. I should have checked it beforehand, but anyway, let's just keep on watching. But it's got the creepy music. It's setting it up for, you know, to just trash Scientology.
I was reading books and going to lectures and going to things at the different events at the mission, at the local Santa Clara mission. And then I knew I wanted to join the Sea Org and get really involved as soon as I could, which would be right.
Like, it's just telling people's experience, like, at the moment. So it's hard to say that's false data. Like, she just said she joined the Sea Org. Like, how's that false data? You know what I mean? So we'll keep on going.
Sea Org is the most fraternal order of the organization. It's people who really, really believe in the cause and sign a billionaire contract, which I did when I was, you know, as soon as I could. I left skid marks getting into that billionaire contract. You thought you were doing something good to have a positive effect on all of mankind. That's what Hubbard says. Everything you do for endless trillions of years depends on what you do here and now with and in Scientology.
I began to ask this question, what is man? And I found, oddly enough, that nobody could tell me what man was. What did he consist of? Where was he going? What was he doing? To really know life, you've got to be part of life. You must get down and look. You must get into the nooks and crannies of existence. You have to rub elbows with all kinds and types of men before you can finally establish what he is.
And you in fact did this?
Yes, I've slept with bandits in Mongolia, and I've hunted with pygmies in the Philippines. As a matter of fact, I have studied 21 different primitive races, including the white race. And my conclusions were that man, he was a spiritual being that was pulled down to the material, the fleshly interests, to an interplay in life that was, in fact, too great for him to confront. And I concluded finally that he needed a hand.
To understand Scientology, you have to understand the life and mind of its inventor, L. Ron Hubbard. Hubbard was a prolific writer. He actually holds the Guinness Book of World Records for the number of books published, more than 1,000. Hubbard got his start in the Depression, writing pulp fiction, named for the cheap paper used. Writers were paid a penny a word, so they had to write a lot to make money. Hubbard...
They bring up this penny... They love bringing up this argument that Hubbard was paid when he was a fiction writer before Scientology, that this whole penny a word thing, they love to bring this up because they're trying to make out that he was poor, and so he made Scientology to get money. And so that they tend to bring this up a lot, the penny a word thing. It's bullshit. By the way, I think that this is really clever, this documentary so far, because this is like the lawyer standing there, right, and not making it so obvious, right? No, let's say, like, you got the police lawyer in that example I was saying. The police lawyer is trying to make the judge think that the guy's bad. it's like the police lawyer can say, oh, he's trash, he did this and that, blah, blah, blah. He can really go at it really hard, or he can be really subtle and careful and say, and make the judge think that the guy is bad, but do it in a way that so the judge doesn't think that, oh, this police lawyer must really have it in for this guy. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's really sort of one-one-y in that it's like you're not making it extremely obvious that you're trashing the subject. You know what I mean? You're not making it extremely obvious that you're trashing the guy who crashed the car. Do you know what I mean? You just say, you bring up all the arguments though, of course, that make the guy seem bad. Like you say, well, he had a heroin addiction and he shoplifted at high school and he comes from a troubled background. And so you run off all the reasons why, right? But you say it in a subtle way and it makes it seem like you're not hating on the guy, but you're really setting up the judge to think that the guy is really bad who crashed the car. That's what this is doing. It's not coming straight out the gates and being very direct and saying Scientology is horrific, it wrecked, blah, 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 and using really bad music and like really going excessive. It's doing it in a very peaceful, subtle, professional way. And the really sick one-money thing about it is that it makes people think that that it's not being biased. It's covering up that it's biased, okay? So it's like, it's on that scale, like I'm saying, it's gone on the total hater scale, right? But it's making it, because it's being a bit one-one-y, it's making it seem like it's more in the balanced area. Giving that perception, but it's not. It reminds me of a time I watched a documentary on vaccines where they actually spoke to someone who had been damaged by vaccines. And it gave the perception that they were giving a fair and balanced investigation into vaccines. And it turned out that vaccines are good. Do you see what I mean? It created that perception. But I was watching it and I was like, no, they're not interviewing anyone who's anti-vaccine. They interviewed someone who got damaged by vaccines but said vaccines are a good thing and he just had a bad reaction once off and it's really rare or whatever. And they put on some creepy music a little bit, right? And when they were advertising the vaccine documentary, they put on a little bit of creepy music, right? So you thought, oh, this is going to be expose on the truth about vaccines. And then you find out, you got to watch it, and it's like, no, this is just a full-on argument saying the vaccines are good. But it's done in such a clever one-one-y, such a professional way, people actually think that it's not biased. I could watch it, and I could tell it was bullshit. I could tell it was like the same thing that this is doing, where it's choosing all the bad arguments but it's presenting them in a one-one-y, like deceptive, professional, smooth way, so it appears like it's being a balanced documentary, but it's not. But I went on the forum and saw people write their comments, and some average Joes, they wrote, oh, it was great to see a fair, balanced investigation into vaccines. Because people can't pick up on this stuff. They're not as smart, they've got MU phenomena going on, they're not as in present time. So they can watch the documentary and they can hear a little bit of creepy music and, you know, see that they spoke to someone who got damaged by vaccines, and then they go, oh, that means that this documentary was fair and balanced. What a good documentary. You know, but it's not the case. So people can get tricked by it. So this is what this is doing. It's making the perception that it's fair and balanced.
So fast on long rolls of butcher paper that he used to drip sweat on his typewriter.
Even the language, this is it. That bit there was classically, they said Pulp Fiction because it's printed on cheap paper and he got a penny word, and on butcher, they go, he what are they saying? He types out stuff like butcher paper or whatever. And the whole thing, that was molded and carved. It's presenting Hubbard in this ugly way, or as some poor fiction writer. It's got connotations. That was so one-one-y. Let's listen to that again.
With
typewriter. More than 1,000. Hubbard got his start in the Depression, writing Pulp Fiction.
Oh, just even though everything about this is perfect. The Depression, make a tough time, you know.
Named for the cheap paper used.
Cheap paper used.
Writers were paid a penny a word,
Writers pay
so
you
they
a
had
penny
to
a
write a
word.
lot to make money.
They love to make money. Like a lawyer would have a wet dream over hearing this 30-second piece. It's just so perfectly written.
Hammered away so fast on long rolls of butcher paper.
Hammered away so fast. Like hammered. He doesn't say he typed really fast. Hammered away, you know, it's
He
perfect.
used to drip sweat on his typewriter.
Drip sweat in the typewriter, like whoa.
Hubbard's career took off.
Like I'm sure Hubbard's typed a lot in his past and it's been hot weather sometimes when he's done it, and maybe one time he said, oh yeah, I was sweating, like, but it's just totally blown out. Like,
He began to write for a magazine called Astounding Science Fiction. Along with authors like Isaac Asimov and Robert Heinlein, Hubbard wrote stories with a sense of mission to get man to the stars.
of course, Hubbard wrote different genres, but they go straight into the science fiction one. You know, like really trying to push that one because it makes everyone think, oh, Scientology, he's just making it up like a science fiction story because Scientology has some advanced science in it and talk about aliens and stuff. So it's like totally like they just love pushing that bullshit argument that Hubbard was a fiction writer. See, he made up all of Scientology. And then it's just like, well, how about you investigate Scientology and see what information's in there and fact check that. And then you fact check and you find out it's good information and it isn't just fiction and made up shit.
He found his true métier in science fiction. And a lot of what Scientology is, he had previously written about in the form of his science fiction. He had the ability to fabricate these
questionable
amazing tales. And he transported those imaginary stories into his theology.
See, the problem is that when you really know how the world works and when you really come into PT and you clear all your words and you know everything, you know that you can just argue anything. You can argue that teapots are good or teapots are bad. And you can present things in a way that spins stuff to say that it's good or spin stuff to say that it's bad. Like you can when you become smart, you can just argue anything. You can read Hubbard's fiction books from the 30s and say, oh, see, this relates to that, and you can connect dots anywhere, right? You know, you can argue that killing people is a good thing or it's a bad thing. Like, it's just like, you know, but the question is, you look at all the information, then you decide, you know, and that's how you work out the truth. But it's just when you learn that, when you know that you can just argue anything, like if you know enough about the world and stuff, you can sit down and make a convincing argument that teapots are bad or something, or they're good, or war's bad or war's good. It's just like, it's silly. So this is one thing that lawyers definitely know, you know. It's just like, hey, what argument do you want me to go with? That you're good or you're bad? Because I can just do whatever. And I can just look for all the evidence, you know, that you're good, or all the evidence that you're bad, and then just present it. I mean, it's pretty simple, you know. So when you're listening to this, you're like, I'm sure there's some sort of truth to him, like what is said there, where he's saying that, like, in some of the fiction it relates a bit to Scientology, and it's like, it's not wrong, but it's just like, it's kind of wrong, if you know what I mean. It's just like, you can argue any point, you know.
Pearl Harbor, Hubbard took command of a sub-chaser, but he was still a man prone to invention. He would write that he sunk 2 Japanese subs, but in fact, just off the coast of Oregon, he opened fire on what turned out to be a log and dropped most of his depth charges on underwater magnetic rocks.
Okay, so I would like to know how they fact-checked that. Like, what if that was just a rumor that was made up, a lie that someone spread? I mean, I've never mentioned that in any of my videos. I've heard it before, but I haven't mentioned it because I don't know the truth of it. And also, I know that he was a naval intelligence officer, and so what he really did during the World War II, we will never know, because everything's secret about when you're in naval intelligence and when you're in the CIA. Everything's secret about what you did and that sort of stuff, and it doesn't get released. So I don't like the fact checking of whoever wrote this into the movie. I mean, I just think that's questionable. You know, they're trying to present him out to be some dumbass Navy guy, and it's like, Hubbard wasn't a dumbass Navy guy. I'm certain of it. He's just too smart for that. You can tell. I mean, all the stuff he worked out, he was switched on to stuff. He created a huge religion, you know what I mean? Like, it's small compared to the other religions, but it's like, he created a worldwide religion. I mean, it's a big thing. You know, dumbasses can't do that, you know. He's not some silly dumbass who accidentally shot Navy ships at a log or something. Like, it's just not right.
When he accidentally shelled a Mexican island, he was relieved of his command.
What makes you sure of that? See, he'll listen to me and my suggestion. Whoever wrote this will listen to my suggestion about the Jonestown thing being set up by the CIA and stuff, and not being a legitimate cult. He'll say, Andy, conspiracy theorist, where do you get that information from? But then he'll hear this crap about Hubbard and he'll go, yeah, I believe that. Yeah, and he'll go and write it into the movie. And it's like, what do you fact check? You know, like, what's your ability to fact check? Because it's like, some things you don't bother fact checking because you think they sound ridiculous, and other things you don't bother fact checking because you just think they sound good, so you accept it. And it's just like, you're just a walking ball of dumbness, and you need to do your data evaluators course.
After the war,
you need to do your Scientology so you learn and study things and investigate, and you realize how to find out the truth about things.
Ended up in Los Angeles, where he settled in with a small group of seekers and visionaries.
A guy named Jack Parsons, a fascinating man, was one of the founders of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And there's actually a crater on the moon named after Jack. He was a significant scientific figure, but he was also the head honcho in this black magic cult. It was called the OTO, or the Ordo Templi Orientis. They followed the teachings of Aleister Crowley, a famous sexual magic figure in England. Parsons had a mansion in Pasadena. They would have ceremonies, and they were seeking some sort of goddess figure that he could impregnate.
So they go into out there stories and stuff, and I'm not saying that it's not true. I mean, there are people who are into interesting things, and Aleister Crowley was like into magic, like legitimate magic, trying to move objects with his mind and doing out there stuff, and he was probably doing weird sex rituals and stuff, because you can achieve certain things and stuff, spiritual stuff. It's a whole subject that we're not taught living in modern Western society. But it's just the fact that they're mentioning it, you know what I mean? And yet they don't mention like other conspiracies. It's just like, oh, so here you're willing to entertain it because you're just going to use it to... You're willing to entertain conspiracy theories, right? Or rumours, if they support your argument, and you can use them to trash Hubbard, then you'll do that, because he's going to connect Hubbard to Aleister Crowley and make up that Hubbard's a weirdo as well. Like, you can just tell.
The Antichrist. Hubbard moved in and became Parsons' assistant. One night, this beautiful redhead named Marjorie Cameron.
And again, they don't mention that Hubbard was possibly a naval intelligence agent that could have been looking into these areas and stuff on a mission. Like, they just anyway.
Showed up at the door. She was perfectly willing to engage in this sexual ritual in order, supposedly, to produce the Antichrist. She and Jack eventually got married. That happened after Hubbard ran off with Jack's girlfriend, Sarah Northrop.
Scientology and Hubbard would later refuse to acknowledge his relationship with Sarah, but we uncovered Sarah's own recollections of her time with Hubbard.
He was 13 years older than I was. I thought he was a great war hero, a captain of a ship that had been downed in the Pacific, and he was weeks on a raft, and he'd been blinded by the sun, and his back had been broken. All these things were complete lies, but I didn't know it at the time. I believed every word of it.
If only Sarah had seen...
Again, I'd like to know where they get this stuff from.
Hubbard's military records in a 900-page file.
Like, the people who wrote this movie don't understand how the truth can be manipulated. And let's say I hated the guy who invented Weet-Bix. You could set up an intelligence operation to bring that guy down. And if you've got a budget and access to staff members, you can start doing stuff like planting information about that guy, about his history, talking to ex-lovers or whatever, and you can trash the guy who invented Weet-Bix. And some idiot journalist can come along, some dumbass, and they can go, well, we fact-checked like the Weet-Bix guy and we spoke to this person and we saw this piece of paper and yeah, that means that it's true. And it's just like, does it? I mean, really, you don't know. You don't know. I mean, that's, you know, you can plant information and mess things up. And I've found, if anything, more like something we can be quite certain of is that history is just wrong. Whatever the mainstream history idea of anything is, then that's going to be a lie. You know, you just don't know what to believe when it comes to these things. Like, I remember I heard someone in some documentary, I think about Hitler, talking about some sexual thing, and you just like, you know, how do you know if you can believe that? Like, how do you know? Like, really, how do you know? I mean, like, Hitler would have had English intelligence and US intelligence and stuff, and they would have put out information and stuff to make people hate him more, so then they go into war more. And it's like the Trump example, like the Trump-Russia thing. It's just like, is the Trump-Russia thing, like what are they talking about when Trump colluded with Russia? I mean, how do you know that's true? Someone could just plant evidence, you know? So it's just silly.
Activities are laid out in extraordinary detail.
I really think everybody needs to do like a 5-year stint working for the CIA as an intelligence agent, seeing the intelligence ops that go on, see them do a false flag, just see what goes on, and then you realize, oh, shit on this planet Earth is much more complex than what I thought. I can't just Google L. Ron Hubbard or Trump or whatever and get accurate information about that person. You know, this shit is wild. So that's why when it's like Aleister Crowley, like, I mean, what can I say? I would just wouldn't comment. But these people, you know, they talk about things and they go into areas and it's just like, yeah, like I'm going to trust what you have to say.
That he had been blinded and crippled during the war, and that practices that would form the basis of Scientology had cured him. But his records show that his only wounds were mild arthritis and conjunctivitis.
You know, records can be planted and falsified and stuff, so it's just like, you know.
We had this terrible fight, and he told me he was going to commit suicide if I didn't marry him. I really believed him, so we got married. We spent the winter in that lighthouse on the lake in the Poconos. I remember one awful night when I was asleep and he was up typing. And he hit me across the side of the head with a .45 because I was smiling in my sleep and he said I was thinking about somebody else. I got up and left the house and walked on the ice of the lake. I was terrified. He always said that he would kill me rather than let me leave him. The only good thing I got from Ron was my baby. We moved to Elizabeth, New Jersey, and he started writing Dianetics. The book was conceived, and he started working on it in 1950. He said many times that the only way to make any real money was to have a religion. That's essentially what he was trying to do with Dianetics. Get a religion where he could have an income, and the government wouldn't take it away from him in the form of taxes.
it's just like, yeah, I mean, it's all about fact checking. It's just like, but here's the problem about here on Earth. You'll have someone, let's say you have some lefty who like loves global warming, and they'll fact check, and they consider that they fact check right, and they'll say, yeah, global warming's happening and we should do all this stuff, and then you have someone else who's like a right winger who isn't really into global warming, and they'll do their little fact check, and then they'll come to their conclusion, and it's just like, well, they both fact checked, who's right? You know? And so that's why it's almost a shame, because I'm just like saying, let's do fact check, but then you know that these Scientology haters who make these attack pieces, when they go to fact check, they come to false conclusions. And I guess this is kind of why people need to do Scientology and other self-improvement stuff, because people are just broken calculators, and broken calculators just don't come to right conclusions. And like, for example, like you get like, I don't know, Joe Rogan do some fact checking and investigation into the alien abduction phenomenon, and he'll say it's not really happening, or he's not really sure it's happening, or he doubts that it's happening. That's his result back. That's a faulty calculator answer. It's just ridiculous. It's happening. I mean, there's so much evidence for it. When you look into it, it's happening, you know. So, you're always going to get inaccurate documentaries when you got bad fact checkers, you know. Anyway, some people just have the ability to find out the truth about things, and other people don't. You know, everyone can try and become a car mechanic, and some mechanics just can't find what the problem is in the car, and other mechanics are smarter and can find what is wrong with the car. And some people can do Scientology and other self-help stuff, and they can become a much better mechanic where they can find what's wrong with the car, but maybe they'll never become as good as that natural talented person at fixing cars. But it's just interesting that some people are just better at things than others, and you know, when it comes to someone like Joe Rogan, for example, I mean, I don't know, he's not that good at fact checking. Like, he'll look into things and he'll research, but like, he's not the sort of person where I'll like trust his conclusion on things, because I've seen him be too biased and stuff. He's one of these people that like look into something and go, oh, that sounds ridiculous, oh, it must be ridiculous, and it's just like, no, oh, that sounds ridiculous, but let's investigate, be objective, and look at the information. And don't let the ridiculousness of it stop you from coming to the truth. But some people will hear about, I don't know, someone getting abducted by aliens and having something shoved in their ass and them floating out through a window, and then the alien saying, we come in peace, or something. And they hear that and they just go, oh, this is just ridiculous, this is some Hollywood movie or something. And then they go, I've fact-checked the whole abduction thing and it's not true. And it's just like, you're a dumbass. You don't have the ability to investigate. You're just not good at it. Some people just can't do it. I mean, I went to a naturopath a few months ago, and I basically was kind of finishing the naturopath's sentences. Like, I knew what was a problem I was having. It was a detox thing. I even sort of knew the things that it was. I'm not freaking trained in being a naturopath. How the hell do you think Andy can do this? Because Andy's damn good at investigating. That's why. You know, he's done a lot of Scientology. He reads things, he clears his words, he looks into things, and he has the ability to work out what really happened and what's really going on. And so that's how, when I was at the naturopath, I could almost be my own naturopath. Other people do not have that ability. Not everyone has that. And there are people out there like that who spew their opinions. And the people who made this documentary are people who are spewing their opinions about Scientology, but they're not really that smart. They couldn't come to the correct conclusions about the Jonestown massacre. You know, they can't come correct conclusions about global warming. You know, this is why you look into things. I was listening to something on Joe Rogan about where this physicist guy mentioned something about gender, and he said something like, he didn't acknowledge that there's a difference between natural abilities of a man and natural abilities of a woman. And I'm just like, well, I mean, I'm not going to trust what you have to say about quantum physics, you know, because I don't think you're that good at fact checking or like coming to the truth about things. If you can't see that there's a difference between a man and a woman, and you can't see that there's a difference between a white man and an African man, then like in natural abilities and that sort of stuff, then I'm sorry, you're not smart enough, and you're a victim of lefty brainwashing to think that we're all equal and the same. There's a definite difference. You talk to someone who's really good at maths, who actually is talented at maths and stuff, and he goes, yeah, I can teach girls maths and I can teach boys maths, but boys are just better at it. And that's why if you look in history of the most famous mathematicians, they're all men, because there's like some natural ability, maybe something unlocked in the man's DNA or whatever, to be better at that, okay? Just like women have a more natural ability to be psychic, and they can sometimes have telepathic communication with their babies. Serious. They'll know when the baby's hurt or something. Whereas the man doesn't quite have that. Because the bodies are different, they serve different roles. Why do you think women have breasts? To feed the baby. You know what I mean? Why do you think man doesn't have boobies? Because he's not supposed to do that. You know what I mean? It's quite simple. He's not supposed to do that. You get that, right? So it's like, there's differences between the bodies and the abilities, you know. A man's supposed to do something. You know what I mean? Woman's supposed to do something. And when we get those roles mixed up, it's not the best scenario. You know what I mean? So if you're hearing something by a physicist who can't even spot the differences in the genders or in the races, which is just so obvious. You can just take a bunch of people, like a bunch of Africans and then a bunch of white people, and you can see a definite IQ difference. It's what made me aware of this was first off was with the Jews. Because I was like, hold on a second, these people are smarter. They got more abilities or more able to do something. And I looked into it, and then of course the IQ results are that on average Jews have higher IQs than white guys, and obviously much higher than black people. They do, on average. Jews have higher IQs. And that's not some environment thing. It's just like, if you take that baby, that baby with some Jewish, it's usually when it's white and Jew DNA, it's, you know, that's a great combination, because I don't know, it just ends up being a lot of successful people here on Earth have got, you know, like Aryan and Jewish background. It's like those two races created a super race when they were breeding the bodies, and they created this race with really high IQs. But a lot of people on TV and that sort of stuff are these people with the Jewish background, the white people with Jewish backgrounds, and anyway, so if you can't notice that, then you just don't have the ability to observe. And I don't know what's wrong with you, because I could notice it. I could notice it when I had like a Jewish teacher when I was like 16, and he was talking about, I think, the Vietnam War, and I was like, oh, this guy knows his stuff. Like, he actually knows information. He's pretty switched on and smart. And I thought, gosh, that's interesting. And then I came across some other person with a Jewish background, and I was just like, yeah, they're sort of smart. They're not like Seinfeld, and that's a Jewish show. And I was like, yeah, I mean, there's something more about them. I was like, no wonder why they're more successful and they have higher income. And there is an element in them where they're greedier, absolutely, like they have a love of money. Again, I don't bother with PR bullshit or PC bullshit. I mean, this is true. There is a thing about money. So there is a whole side of Judaism where these people are more successful because they're more motivated, let's put it that way. Like, so you look at their incomes and you see their incomes are higher, and so part of it's because they do tend to have higher IQs, but also because they tend to be greedier, right? So it's, you know, it's not all, anyway, I don't know, I think I'm getting off track. But I mean, people just don't know this. They just can't open up their eyes and see the difference, you know what I mean? And what really helps is traveling. You've got to travel. You got to go to Australia, right? You got to go to an Aboriginal community. You got to go to an African community. You got to go to an African community in America. You got to go to a white American community. You got to go to a Jewish community in America. You got to go to a Taiwanese city. You got to go to a Thailand island. You've got to go to these different places and observe the people and see how the bodies are different. And you'd start noticing things, and you start noticing coincidences, and you go, there's more to it going on. You go to a part of town where the crime rates are up, where the houses look run down like a piece of crap, and you look at what the people look like in that area, and you go, interesting. Is Andy going to say? I'm not going to say, because you can already work it out. You can put 2 and 2 together. You go to another certain area, and you notice people are a little bit shifty. And you go, what's with this shiftiness? And it's a part of this little shiftiness, a part of their culture. And you notice it's a body thing. The DNA is different. Stuff is going on. This world is wild. I found out, like I was saying, I noticed the difference between the bodies because of noticing the Jewish thing. That was the first thing. Maybe just go, hold on a second, what's going on with these Jews? I was kind of annoyed because I was like, why are they representing only this much of the population, but in people who have been successful, they're representing this much? I didn't like that because I was jealous. Basically, I was like, that's unfair, you know. I want to have the best DNA, or I still felt like I could be a success and all that sort of stuff. I felt like I was intelligent as them, but I was just like, I just kind of thought it's a bit unfair, you know what I mean? But then the second reason I found out is because of all my investigations into all the alien stuff. Because guess what the aliens are? They're different bodies and they have completely different abilities, you know? And then I noticed how different races came here and seeded the earth, and how some races actually have Neanderthal DNA. Like, basically they were having monkey sex, like, you know, but walking monkeys. The things that were around thousands of years ago. And then, so the humans thousands of years ago could actually have sex with these walking monkeys, basically, these cavemen type beings, and then it's a new race sort of created, and then they breed with other humans, and then, so Earth is pretty interesting because it's not all just one type of body, they're different bodies, you know. And also, another reason was because I went to a school. There's a lot of Asians in Melbourne, and it's basically been taken over by, like, Chinese. And I noticed in class how they could get maths better than me. They could just get it. And I would go to them for help in class and stuff. And they just had a better brain. They could just do it. Like I think maths requires quick memory or something, because you're remembering the formula and you're remembering what you write earlier. So if you're not a good memory person, you're not going to be fast at maths. You're not going to be able to pick it up as fast. But good memory people can do it, you know. So I noticed that the Asians were definitely different. But the reason I bring it up a lot is just because we're under this whole multicultural thingo where they've just tried to make all the sexes out to be the same and make out all the races out to be the same. And it's just absolute bullshit and it's crap. And I urge people to protect the city they're in and not encourage it to be flooded by foreigners, so that they have their own city and you've got your place and it doesn't get taken. Because when you got weak people like the people of Melbourne were, a whole foreign thingo just takes over and you're just gone. You know, like, it's just now. You know, in 50 years' time, Melbourne's going to look like Taiwan. And it's already very close to looking like that. But that's just what happens when you don't protect your land and when you don't I don't know, defend yourself and stuff. But anyway, I'll continue. Not much longer to go. I'll just pay a little bit more. So I just think it's a big discovery, this thing about the differences in the body races. I mean, I was aware there were some differences, but it wasn't until I really looked into it and I found out that leftists were covering up the studies that they have showing that there's differences in the IQs of the races and stuff, because it's offensive to publish it and stuff. So they cover, and the differences between the genders and IQ and stuff like that. And so it's just disgusting, because they're dealing in lies. They're putting you into some crazy, bizarro world, and it's just insane. And it's just like, no, people need to know how things actually function and work and stuff.
Dianetics was an immense success. From the moment it was published in 1950, it swept through America and other countries.
And also, I'll just say this in case, of course, I'm not saying they're all greedy, you know what I mean? Because someone will write a comment saying, no, I'm Jewish and I'm not greedy and money hungry and I'm poor. And it's just like, yeah, I'm not saying you're all like that. I'm just saying there tends to be a bit more that are into the money, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, stop being such a dumbass, you people who do those things. I say one thing and they make out that I'm saying that 100% of the time. I'm just saying there tends to be more of it than amongst people of, let's say, Germanic background. There's not as much as a greediness for money. But amongst Jewish, there's a bit more of the greediness. And of course, that doesn't mean I'm promoting Hitler or concentration camps. Okay? So, shut up.
This book, that's the background of all of this. That's what started all the trouble. And we expected this to sell about 6,000 copies, and it hit the top of the bestseller list of the New York Times, and it just stayed there month in, month out. It was like I started an avalanche.
Dianetics, the modern science of mental health, is considered to be the fundamental text which is the foundation upon which all else is built.
Oh yeah, in a Scientology documentary, we really need Mike Rinder, like somebody who was like involved with the church, was like a corrupt church member, was part of the problem, was supporting the corrupt leader who stole the church from L. Ron Hubbard and his family, and his management that he put in, stole it from them all. This Mike Rinder guy was assisting this guy, and then he left and said Scientology's all bad. And he's the guy you talk to for your documentary. Wow, that's good. That's good guest checking. You know what I mean? Let's choose him as a guest for the documentary.
One of the theories of Dianetics is to discover these things that are very traumatic or have been very upsetting to you. And if you can observe exactly what happened, the power of that incident to influence you today is removed.
So they're still going with this sort of creepy music, and they do this technique, and it's just amazing. People aren't aware of this sort of stuff, right? They do this technique that when the person's sitting there, they put the film light so it casts a little bit of a shadow over the face, and it creates a creepy look and stuff. And they did this when they interviewed the mainstream media, when they interviewed Alex Jones, right? When Megyn Kelly interviewed him, right? They literally did that. So they sat down with the cameras and the lights. They put normal lighting on Megyn Kelly so she looks fresh and bright, because she's being the good person, the host. And then they're sitting next to Alex Jones and making out Alex Jones as the evil man that was bullying the Sandy Hook parents, right? And they intentionally turn off one of the lights so then it has a shadow. And you see the actual footage. And Alex Jones says this. He goes, look, they gave me the criminal lighting or whatever. And then you look and you watch it and you're like, yeah, they did give you the criminal lighting. And you're like, they are trying to manipulate the viewers. Do you understand? They're shifty fuckers. And I'm sick of these ones in the media that do this sort of shit. It's like, if you do a news report, you can do a news report with Charles Manson. You don't put an intentional cast of shadow over his face to try and make him look creepy. That sort of stuff is bullcrap, and it's manipulative, and it's taking advantage of people who are too dumb to understand Alex Jones, right? And it's making them think badly of Alex Jones. And I remember my mum actually saw that something with Alex Jones, and I think the Megyn Kelly thing, and I remember she thought he was bad or whatever. because of that. She's like, he's bullying Sandy Hook, whatever. She got manipulated by the mainstream media and the casting of the lights and the creepy music and the arguments they bring up and stuff. But people don't understand how shifty the world is and how shifty the media is. I think it's very important. Another thing with the CIA thing, is I said it would be good to work for the CIA for a bit. It's good to work in the media for a bit and see how the news is collected and worked out, and how they film things and how they pick actors and all that sort of stuff, and then you get an idea of how shifty things are.
Dianetics is that you have two sides of your mind. There is the analytical side, which is a perfect computer. It remembers everything. It's flawless. It never makes a mistake. And then there's the reactive side. And this is where all your neuroses and anxieties and fears are stored. And where do they come from? They come from engrams. An engram is like a memory.
Man has an automobile accident. He has a picture of an automobile accident.
All right, so I got to stop it. I mean, I might as well, so yeah, it's got this subtle creepiness to this whole thing, and even the way they show this guy who's talking, right? I think he was the guy that wrote the book. The way he looks on his face looks concerning. You know what I mean? Like, so he, just then he was saying, what was he saying? He goes, well, they have this thing called engram, but if you look at his face on it, he looked at his tone or whatever he's giving out. He's not like, oh yeah, so they have this thing called an engram, and it's like, he's got this thing that's like, he looks very reserved, and he looks like he's a concerned cult investigator, and he's disturbed about what he's discovered. So now the TV is talking to him, and he's like, so they have this thing called an engram, and the engram is blah blah blah, and it makes you look like, oh, this is a man that's concerned about what he's come across. Like, all this stuff has an effect, you know. They probably chose him for a reason. Like, anyway, you know, you talk like, it's just the way things are presented, man. Anyway, it's just shifty and shit. So I guess you can download this illegally, this movie Going Clear, which I'd recommend, so that they can't get any money towards it, because they don't deserve any money, because they've done a biased documentary on Scientology. There's some whoppers in there. I don't know if I should continue. There's just, yeah, there's whoppers in this. They go into some of the confidential OT stuff, which is, of course, inappropriate and unfairly represented, and you know, like, they won't say, they'll go into like something about the OT levels, and they won't be like, yeah, so, but we do know aliens exist, and so, you know, and there's all these like ancient monuments on other planets and stuff that NASA are covering up. So, like, I mean, Hubbard could totally be right about this. They don't say that at all, which is a true, fair, honest truth about it. They'll just go, oh, Hubbard said this wacky story about aliens. Oh my God, Scientology's wacky. Like, it's just so ridiculous. So that's it for this briefing. I've been Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy. You've been listening to the Indie Scientology podcast. It's good to be back. I'm not going to take any breaks, I promised. I promise. Remember, what you thought was impossible is possible.